All right, on today's show, fear returns back into Nate's life to make it miserable. Nate finally leaves the mansion, and where does hope play in this story? All that and more on today's show. My name is Christian, and welcome to Let's Talk Gratitude podcast. If this is your first time visiting the channel, first off, I want to thank you for clicking on the video. Here on this channel, we think thoughtfully and biblically about the great stories within our lives and the stories that exist in our culture. Now, with that said, let's get to the first topic. We are finishing the second half of NF's story that he tells through his music. If you haven't watched the first part of this story, I highly suggest that you go click away, watch the first part, then come back so that you don't miss any details of this beautiful story. Alright, so if we remember how we're doing this, we've split this story into three parts. In the first in the first video, we talked about the setup and the conflict of the story, and in this video, we finish off with the resolution of the story. So, let's begin where we left off in the last video, talking about the song "Why." In the song "Why," we saw that this was Fear's return back into Nate's life. And we're now going to talk about what Fear's return means for Nate. So let's look back at Why to see Fear's mission now that he's returned. So let's read. This is Fear talking. Yeah, what's your definition of success? I don't trust the thoughts that come inside my head. I don't trust this thing that beats inside my chest. Who I am and who I want to be cannot connect. So what's Fear's mission here? We see that Fear's mission is to keep Nate from trusting his instincts and his thoughts, to keep Nate from becoming the man that he wants to be. And why does Fear want to do this? It's because Fear wants to keep Nate dependent on himself, on Fear. So this brings us to the beginning of the Search album. And we're going to start with two songs. The songs The Search and Change. And what we find in these two songs is that after beating Fear back in Intro 3 in the Perception album, and after Fear's return back in Why after Perception, we find that Nate is at rock bottom. And we're going to look at this, we're going to read from the song The Search to hear from Nate. So here's The Search. Hey Nate, how's life? I don't know, it's alright. I've been dealing with some things like every human being and really didn't sleep much last night. He continues, last year I had a breakdown, thoughts telling me I'm lost getting too loud. Had to see a therapist and I found out something funny is going on up in my house. So if you remember back in part 1, the house that Nate's referring to is the mansion inside of his head. The mansion that represents Nate's mind, right? The mansion is the setting of this story. But who's Nate talking to here, right? We look at the first line, hey Nate, how's life? Who's talking to Nate there? I believe we're being introduced to a new character in this story, but we're going to table that for right now until this character reveals himself fully a little later. In the meantime, let's look at the song Change. So let's hear Nate. See, all my emotions are liars. All my emotions are violent. They don't want freedom to find me. Mention that name and everyone riots. That name being freedom. That's why I'm checking my vitals. They keep on working, but I know. Breathing don't mean you're alive, so I back up all of my trash and walk out on my tightrope. Positive thoughts are my rivals. I'm trying to be on their side, though. Should I feel comfortable? I don't. Last year, I felt suicidal. So where's Nate been in between the Perception album and the Search album? Well, we can tell that in between these two albums, Nate has had a mental breakdown. His emotions, fear, anger, pride, they're all keeping freedom away from them. Even rioting at the mention of freedom's name. We also know that he's been suicidal. So Nate is at the lowest point in this journey. Okay, he's lower than where he started. And Nate will tell us why he's here. In the interlude, halfway through this album, it's really more of an interview style of a song. He's just talking in the mic in the studio. So let's hear what Nate has to say, why he's at rock bottom. He says, my most considered successful moment of my life was the worst. The most depressed I've ever been. Literally feeling like I'd probably be happier if I was just dead. I got a number one song on a billboard. My song is massive right now. Like I may never have a song this big again. My tour, I think every date sold out except one date. So literally, everything that I'd always dreamed of happening, and I felt, I didn't feel happy at all. And so I think what happened was I spiraled really bad, because I was like, I'm here, and if this is it, there's got to be more for me. Because if this is it, like, it's not gonna work. So we see that Nate has bet all his emotional and mental progress on his music, believing that if he gains some level of success in his musical career, that he'll be able to heal. That success would heal him. But he finds that it doesn't work. So what's he do? Well, at rock bottom, he does the only thing he can do. He seeks outside help. He's found that he can't do this thing alone. He doesn't try to fight this battle alone, and he goes to a therapist. So we talked about on Wednesday how we can't do this fight alone. We weren't made to do this fight alone. The therapist gives Nate the answers that he's looking for, the answers to fix the problem. And it involves Nate finally leaving the mansion. So let's look again at the search to see what Nate's talking about. So here's Nate. I've been searching. Well, what does that mean, Nate? I've been learning. Grabbing my keepsakes, leaving my burdens. Well, I bought a few with me, because I'm not perfect. And he later says, it's worth it, though. Cold world out there, kids. Grab your coats. Been a minute, I know, now I'm back to Rome, looking for the antidote to crack the code. I'm looking for the map to hope. You seen it? So now we see that Nate's on the move, okay? He was at rock bottom. He sought help. He got help. And now, he's on the journey out of the valley. Okay? Towards what? We look at that last line, I'm looking for the map to hope. He's moving towards Hope, who we're going to get to later. Because I believe this is the new character we're being introduced to, Hope. But we'll wait to get to him. But like we've said before, if you're trying to fight fear, you need to be ready for fear to fight back. Okay? He's not just going to lay over and let you beat him. The Nate we find in the search and in change isn't the Nate from Intro 3. The Nate in Intro 3 was capable of beating fear. This Nate is a broken man who's freshly glued back together. He just saw a therapist who helped him out of the valley. And that little progress alone, just starting to walk out of the valley, fear can't allow that. Okay? So the search ends, the song The Search ends in the video, the music video of The Search ends with Nate climbing in his shopping cart, which is a representation of his cage, the cage that he locks himself in. Tied to the shopping cart are black balloons, which represent his burdens. Okay? And in the cage, he curls up into a ball. And at the end of the video, someone who's all dressed in white walks up to the cage and puts white clothes inside the cage. So now let's look at the second song on the album, Leave Me Alone, so that we can see this a second conversation between Nate and Fear. It should be noted that in the music video for Leave Me Alone, we see Fear in control here, right? Nate's just freshly out of the lowest point in his life, so he's not in control of himself. Fear is the one who's dominating Nate, and he's talking through Nate. He's dressed in all. We find Nate in the video dressed in all black with a black smile painted across his face. So let's look at Leave Me Alone. This is Fear talking. I hate when they debate if we're underrated. We're so overlooked that they're looking over our numbers, Nathan. We don't do enough interviews or go out in public lately. We don't put enough on our socials to keep the buzz from fading. So this is Fear. This is a Fear who's not satisfied with where Nate's at in his music career. Okay, if you remember back in Intro 3, Fear talked about how Fear was the one that was the heart of Nate's music career. That Fear was the main attraction. Everybody came to Nate to see Fear, not Nate. So here's Nate's response inside Leave Me Alone. Shut your mouth. Yeah, shut your mouth. Better tone it down. Close it now. If you make a sound, I'ma change the dial. Funny how they be acting loud, coming unannounced. Feel the symptoms, couldn't miss 'em, wrestle with 'em. Then I pin and flip 'em, brought some backup, no, well you should get some. Those last two lines are the key lines. Why? Because Nate's response, those last two lines indicate that now he has some backup. Now he's got people that are helping him. It's not just him alone fighting fear and the rest of Nate's emotions. So could he simply be talking about therapy? It could be, but we find one other person who another member that's helping Nate is on the song "Time." Time's written about Nate's wife. And what Nate does on this song that I think is so different from any of his other songs is the way that he addresses matter-of-factly and with some motivation in his voice to change a lot of the. So he's addressing a lot of the issues in his life with this new motivation, right? Being married has put a real face to this motivation. Because it seems that the reason of getting better for your fans isn't a good enough reason, right? They're too ambiguous of a reason, right, to motivate Nate to change. But a wife, someone who's in his life daily, is a ever-present reminder for Nate. So let's read "Time." Got a lot of issues. I'm trying to work through them. Going to therapy for you something that's worth doing. When I know you've been there for me through all of my worst moments, and I know it hurts knowing that I carry this weight on my chest, making it difficult for me to open up and connect. A lot of regrets. I apologize for all of the stress. That's not what I meant to do. You know I love you to death. So again, having a wife in Nate's life is an ever-present motivation for why he can and should continue to change. If we look at Proverbs 18:22, it says, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord." So now let's look at the next song, "Let Me Go." In "Let Me Go," we can see Nate ask a lot of the same questions that he did in Mansion. But in this song, he's begging for fear to let him go. To let Nate leave the mansion and live a free life. So now if we look at Nate's journey sort of as like a progress meter, okay, Nate starts this journey at a low point in Mansion, okay? Then he starts making progress in therapy session. He beats fear in Perception in intro 3, and for the rest of that album makes even more inroads dealing with some of the issues in his life. Then fear returns back in Y and regresses him all the way even further back than he was back in Mansion. And so in Let Me Go, we see him reach back to a point of Mansion where he's asking important questions on how to fix some of the issues in his life. So let's read some lines in Let Me Go to see what questions Nate is asking. My chest feels like a blade's in it. Who put it there? I think they did it. Out the cell now, where am I headed? Am I hellbound? Will I find heaven? Will I feel better or just regret it if I let you go and find the 7 letters being freedom? If I let you go and find the 7 letters I've been looking for, it's like it's never ending. Open all the doors and let the peace enter. So these are the same questions that were asked in Mansion. Okay? But the last line is key. Nate's nervous about opening the doors up to the mansion, but he's very ready for those doors to be open, right? He's calling some things out in his own emotions that he's learned from this whole entire journey. So Nate at this point is not confused about who is currently living in his mansion. He's not confused about how bad they are. He's not confused on how no good they are for Nate. So let's continue looking at Let You Go. I should let you go. Hands are feeling cold. Just leave me alone. I just want control. I feel so exposed. Liars in my home. So Nate is acknowledging that the emotions in his mansion are liars, right? And if you listen to the song, what you'll hear is that in the lines "Leave me alone" and "Liars in my home," you hear fear in the background say "No, no, no," trying to deny that Nate's calling them a liar. So let's continue. They want me to hide. How can I survive? Change your state of mind. I should say goodbye. They want me to beg. They want me to plead. They want me to die. They just want me dead. They just want me hurt. Don't want me to live and don't want me alive. So fear So if we look at fear, fear starts to lose grip over us when we start to finally recognize and acknowledge fear for what it is, a cancer in our life. Okay? If we continue to make excuses for why we give in to fear, then fear just metastasizes. But when we start to acknowledge it for what it is, it loses grip on us. So the next 4 songs, Hate Myself, I Miss the Days, Like This, and Thinking, each talk about in different ways Nate's longing for a time back when fear wasn't around. And he also starts looking forward to a time where fear won't be around. The final song on the album, though, Trauma, is a similar culmination to the one in Therapy Session during the song Lost in the Moment. So this song, Lost in the Moment, was the first conversation that Nate and Fear ever had on a song. In Trauma, Nate's talking to 2 individuals in the song. So one of them is obviously Fear, right? He talks to Fear throughout the song, and the other one is the character that we talked about earlier, Hope. So let's look at the song Trauma. Grab my hand, I'm drowning. I feel my heart pounding. Why haven't you found me yet? I hold you so proudly. Traumas, they surround me, and I'd wish you just loved me back. So in this song, Nate's calling out to Hope. Okay, remember this whole conflict between Fear and Nate is that Nate needs to get away from Fear. But Fear won't let him leave the mansion. Fear keeps lying to Nate. He keeps using Nate's other emotions, anger, pride, regret. He keeps using these emotions to lie to Nate to keep him locked in the mansion. Okay? And now with Nate's newfound help, his wife, his therapist, we see Nate, these 2 new people to help him, bring hope to Nate. An emotion that can actually bring Nate out of the mansion and to freedom. And now with Hope's help, we see Nate return to a perception level of confidence, of comfortability, even though he hasn't defeated fear. Now that he has help, he can bear some of the weight that fear that fear brings him. And so now we're going to look at Clouds, where we see Nate put this newfound comfortability, newfound confidence to face fear to the test. So on the song, on the Clouds mixtape, on the song Just Like You, we find Nate connecting with his fan base. And in fact, he's actually teaching them, okay, giving them real advice on how to deal with some out-of-control emotions, like fear and other emotions. So Nate talks as though his own problems are becoming his past problems, his past issues. He talks as though he's starting to master his issues. Okay, Nate is in this, through the Clouds mixtape, you see Nate starting to learn from the journey, starting to learn from his mistakes, starting to learn from the battles that he's had with fear. See, there's levels to learning, okay? And the highest level of the learning process is being able to actually teach someone what you've learned. That's called mastery. On the song Lost, Nate is able to plainly talk about and break down his past struggles, what they were, how he dealt with them, while also giving advice on how to overcome these struggles, right? He's not just wallowing in his own sorrow. He's not just wallowing in his past. He's actually teaching people how to move away from that past, how to move forward from that past. This is a much more mature Nate on the Clouds mixtape. He's a lot more sober. He's a lot more able to sober-mindedly look at his life. So on the Clouds mixtape, I think the most important song on the album is called Drifting. We see Nate in Drifting call out to Hope again, and then he also sends a prayer to God, the ultimate version of hope. So let's look at the first call to hope. Let's see what Nate says. I see you in a distance, asking me why I'm so distant. I'm convicted. I'm convinced that I predict that all my wishes on my wish list won't be heard, because I'm committed to the lie that feeling safe is unrealistic when I'm drifting. So we see that Nate is calling out to hope again. He's moving a little closer to hope. And what's cool what's cool to see when you move closer to hope, or when Nate moves closer to hope, the more clarity, and this is the important, the more understanding he has how to overcome his struggles. So let's look at the last verse of the song to see the prayer that he sends to God. So he asks God to tell Nate that he's worth it, give Nate more faith, and then the last line is key. Here's what Nate says. I have to innovate. The past intimidates, but I can't remain afraid. So now we're going to get to my personal favorite part of the story. Okay, this is where we get to the culmination of this journey. The point where we finally get to hear from this new character, Hope. We get to hear what his mission is, who he is, why he's here, and we're going to look at the first song on the album called Hope. The song is also called Hope. So let's dive in. This is actually Nate addressing first in these first few lines. Nate says, Hope, I'm on my way, I'm coming. Don't lose faith in me. I know you've been waiting. I know you've been praying for my soul. Hope. So now Nate, at this point, on this first song of the album, is fully committed to finding hope. He's out of the mansion, and he's looking for hope. In the music video for the song, it opens with Nate on a raft in the middle of the ocean. But what instead you see on Nate is he's not dressed in Fear's black clothes. Okay, if you remember back in when we talked about the music video for the song The Search, somebody put white clothes in Nate's cage. And on the song Hope, Nate is finally wearing those white clothes. So we see a Nate who, instead of giving into fear, is now giving into hope. He's letting hope take control of this album. So let's look at let's listen to Hope now and what Hope has to say. So here's Hope on the song that's talking. 30 years you've been dragging your feet. He's addressing fear. Telling me I'm the reason we're stagnant. 30 years you've been claiming you're honest and promising progress. Well, where's it at? I don't want you to feel like a failure. I know that this hurts, but I gave you your chance to deliver. Now it's my turn. That was addressed to fear. That fear had his chance and failed. Now, in the second half of this first verse, we're going to see Hope address Nate. So here's Hope. Don't get me wrong, Nate. You've had a great run. But it's time to give the people something different. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my album, Hope. So if you remember back in the Why song, we talked about how Fear's mission, Fear's definition of success was to get Nate to always second guess himself, right? To never trust his instincts and to keep him from being the person that Nate wants to be. In this song, Hope responds to that question, what's your definition of success? By saying, Hope's definition of success is standing up for what's right, trusting in your instincts, confidently being a creator, boldly being a creator, someone who does what they love even if it's at the cost of profit, and someone who's resilient even when they fail. It's the complete polar opposite of fear. Fear is someone who wants to stay stagnant. Hope is someone who wants to move forward. See, these two things are incongruent with one another. They can't exist in the same space, right? If we're going to look back in the mansion, hope and fear can't exist in the same mansion together. There's not enough floors in the mansion for both of them. So someone is going to have to leave, and that very statement is exactly the premise. Hope and Nate, Hope speaking through Nate, versus fear. So we started this song on a raft, and in the video, the raft finally makes its way ashore. And Nate pulls out a map to find Hope. But on the island waiting for both Hope and Nate is Fear in all black, trying to mess with Nate, trying to lead him in all the wrong directions. Pointing, even though Nate's looking at a map, Fear's pointing Nate in the wrong directions. And in the song, Nate sings about how things have changed since the last time Fear and him fought. Let's hear Nate. It's amazing what a little bit of faith can do if you don't even believe in you. Why would you think or expect anybody else that's around you to? I done did things that I regret. I done said things I can't take back. Was a lost soul at a crossroads who had no hope, but I changed that. So Nate continues to talk in this verse about how far he's come. And eventually, Nate doing all this talking frustrates Fear, and Fear gets tired of listening to Nate basically try to take a victory lap. And what Fear does is pushes Nate into a building. And inside the building, during the music video, when Nate's pushed in it, we hear an old familiar chorus from the song Mansion, back in Nate's first album. We hear familiar words. My mind is a home I'm trapped in, and it's lonely inside this mansion. So Fear, the building that Fear pushed Nate into, is back inside the mansion, right? Remember, Nate left the mansion to go find hope and freedom, and now Fear's pushed Nate, who's now being led by hope, back into the mansion. And if I can overthink this song a bit more, I think what we see here is Fear recognizing that he's fighting a losing battle on the island, right? And now Fear's deciding to take the fight to a place where he's comfortable, right? A home he's more comfortable in. And visually, this is a really cool thing visually, because in the Mansion song, when it came out, there wasn't a music video for the song, and so now Nate gets to take us through the mansion with him, right? We actually get to look inside what some of these rooms are in the mansion. In the first room that Nate shows us, we see Fear sitting in a room surrounded by black balloons, just saluting Nate. Okay, and so what Nate does is quickly close the door, kick back some of the balloons, and leave. Opening the second room, we see a cage. The cage that Nate used to lock himself in. Okay? And inside the cage is an older version of Nate with a black smile and the keys in his hands. Okay? Because if you also remember, back in the Mansion song, Nate talks about how he thinks he's locked in the cage, but God's already told him he's not locked in. Right? Back in intro 3, Nate talks about that he thought he was in prison this whole time, but Nate was the one actually holding the keys. That's all been a lie. So this older version of Nate, what I think represents, this is the version of Nate that never lets himself out of the cage. This is the Nate that never allows himself to grow. This is the Nate that gets too comfortable in Fear, too comfortable in the mansion, and he just grows old inside this cage, always controlled by fear. So while going through these two rooms, Nate sings about how, though the growing pains that he went through were difficult, he needed those pains to help him heal. This is what Nate says. If I'd never hit rock bottom, would I be the person that I am today? I don't believe so. Nate then tells us a new motivation, a new person to help him change. His son. This is what Nate says. Sometimes you gotta be someone you're not to hear the voice of reason. Having kids will make you really take a step back and look in the mirror. At least for me, that's what it did. I wake up every morning and pick up my son, hold him in my arms, and let him know he's loved. Standing by the window, questioning if Dad's ever going to show up. Is it something he's going to have to worry about? Don't get it twisted, that wasn't a shot, Mama. I forgive you. I just don't want him to grow up thinking he'll never be enough. So we see that becoming a father has given Nate the greatest motivation to change. Even saying, Mama, I forgive you. Remember back in How Can You See Me, we saw a bitter Nate who was angry with how his mom passed away. So what Nate is showing us up to now is that in order to master what's inside of us, we first have to ground ourselves into something outside of ourselves, something greater than ourselves. Nate has two things that he grounds himself in. He grounds himself in his new family, his wife and his son, and he grounds himself in God. Right? Remember back in the song, when we were talking about who our protagonist was, back in the song, All I Have, Nate says this: I stand behind these words. I'm a Christian, but I'm not perfect. So now we find Fear again in another losing battle. So what does he do? He does the same thing he did last time. He changes the battlefield. He changes the location to a high cliff. This is almost Fear trying a last-ditch effort to get Nate to jump off the cliff. Okay, and then this setting is the final battle, this cliff top. Because what Nate does next is that he lists every single way that Fear's hurt him for the last 30 years. So Nate talks, he says 30 years of running, 30 years of searching, hurting, pain, fearful, anger, empty, shame, broken, anguish, hopeless, never, 30 years of never, 30 years of maybe, 30 years of later, fake, hollow, sorrow, darkness, sadness, stagnant, chains, 30 years of chains, anguish, suffering, torment, bitter, lonely, 30 years of pushing everyone away. And in between some of these lines, as Nate's saying them, you can hear Fear in the background say, hey Nate, wait. In a sort of like, let's not be rash, in a sort of like, hey, don't do anything crazy sort of manner. After Nate lists these things, Fear lashes out one last time. So the final verse of this song is a shouting match between Fear and Nate. Nate, who's being led by hope. Now during this video, we get to see during the music video of this song, we get to see a incredible visual effect that takes place. When Nate's talking in this last part, he just looks like normal Nate with white clothes on. And when Fear talks, the collar of Nate's white shirt starts to turn black, and a black smile starts to leak across Nate's face. So let's read this confrontation between these two. Starting with Fear. You'll never evolve. Then Nate. I know I can change. Fear. We are not enough. Nate. We are not the same. So Nate is finally separating his identity away from Fear. Fear. You don't have the heart. Nate. You don't have the strength. Fear. You don't have the will. Nate. You don't have the faith. Fear. You'll never be loved. You'll never be safe. And these two things have already been proven false, right? Nate's already been loved and secured by his family, right? He feels safe with his wife. He feels comfortable with his wife, okay? He's already loved by his wife and by his son. Fear. You might as well give up. Nate, I'm not running away. Fear. You don't have the guts. Nate, you're the one afraid. Nate's now turned the tables on Fear, saying, I'm not the one afraid, Fear. You're afraid. And why? Fear. I'm the one in charge. Nate, I'm taking the... And before he finishes that sentence, you hear Fear scream out in desperation, no. No. Nate, I'm taking the reins. What was Fear afraid of? Fear is afraid of losing control over Nate. And this is thanks to the help of hope, right? Hope's help, again, loosen the grip that Fear's had on Nate. And now, Nate's defeated Fear, definitively defeated Fear. And it's not so much that Fear is now non-existent, right? He'll always exist back in the back of Nate's mind, but it's more that Fear's been replaced in the mansion. He's been replaced by who? By hope. And in one line on the song Pandemonium, on the Hope album, you can see that Nate even notices the difference within himself. So here's the line. Something special about me, you can already tell the energy is different. Confidence is at the highest level, I don't ever see it dipping. And as was the case back in Intro 3, throughout the rest of this Hope album, Nate sings and raps like a free man, a man who doesn't have the chains of fear holding him back. And this time it's only more so. And how can we tell? Well, it's because Nate starts to actually resolve some of these past issues that he wasn't able to fix in earlier albums, starting with his relationship with God in the song Happy. So the song Happy is written like a letter to God. So let's look at Happy and see what Nate says. Dear God, please hear me out. I know it's been a couple years since I've reached out and said hello. I bet you're wondering why I keep obsessing on and stressing all the little things, when I should be living life and soaking up the memories. I know I've been selfish, and I have no excuse to give you it's true. So we see Nate take accountability for his own actions, for his own backsliding away from God, and we see a desire throughout the rest of this song for Nate to rebuild that relationship, acknowledge that he needs God to pull him out of this hole, pull him out of the mansion that he's trapped in. Not actually trapped in now, right? Hope has led him in and out of the mansion, but he needs God to keep him out. So we look at the song Bullet now, and we see another song written to his wife. And I think this song is one of the best songs I've ever heard a husband write to his wife. So let's look at some of these lines. Words will never be enough to describe the way we both connected when you had our baby. I'm proud of you. I can't believe it. It still fascinates me. Watching us grow seems like yesterday we met. Life is flying by, makes me emotional just talking about it. Got a lot of memories. Things I can never forget you gave me. Life when I was on empty and I was going crazy. Stood by my side. It's only right that I return the favor. You changed my life and gave me love when I had none to offer. Gave me hope when I was hopeless. Ain't no second thoughts. If it came down to me or you, I swear to God that I would take the bullet. So we see Nate acknowledge how much of a positive impact that his wife has been in his life, and how much that impact has only grown Nate's love for her, acknowledging that no matter what, if it came down to it, Nate would give his life for his wife. So then there's, later on this album, the big resolution, right? So the song Mama is obviously about his mother, and it's a beautiful song about finding closure for Nate's mother's passing, right? Remember, again, we talked about how on How Could You Leave Us, Nate was bitter and angry. And this is the response to that song, the sequel to that song. And I think this song best shows how far as a man Nate's come. The premise of this song is Nate asking his mother what heaven's like. So let's read the song Mama. I gotta know, Mama. Did he show you some grace? Give you a pass and tell you he would carry the weight? Do you smile more? Wonder what it's like when you pray. Is he standing in front of you so you can look at his face? When you talk to him, does he talk back? You ever have conversations about what you regret? Or did it all go away once you got there? Does each breath take you closer to God? Would you say that you cry less? Do you feel at peace yet? Do you laugh more? You feel like heaven is everything you could ask for? But the last lines in this song are the moment, I believe. So here's these last lines. Yeah, I'm grown now. Took me a while to see the bigger picture, because if you were here today and I was talking with you, there'd be a lot of tears of joy falling on my sweatshirt. Probably followed by some apologies and Mom, I missed you. Yeah, I pray you see me down here looking up. Still got a lot of things I need healing from, but I'll get there eventually. So don't you worry none. I just hope you finally get some peace and you feel happy. Mom, I love you. I love this song. This is probably my favorite NF song because, again, it shows how far Nate's come. And I always picture when I listen to this song that Nate in the booth when he asks his mother, I gotta know, Mama, did he show you some grace, give you a pass and tell you it would carry the weight? Do you smile more? Wonder what it's like when you pray? When he says those lines, I always picture Nate smiling into the mic, right? Imagining his mother with peace, imagining his mother resting finally in the amazing presence of God. And I always imagine that Nate is standing at the mic with his son, and with his wife, hoping that his mom can see those three together and that Nate is a grown man who has finally overcome some of these issues. And with that song, After Mama, we reach the final song on the album, Running. We see the last conversation that Nate has with Fear and the mansion. And when we're going to read it, I want you to look at how interesting, in the interesting way that Nate speaks to Fear. So let's read. I'm tired of holding on to you. It's time to let go. It's time to let my pride go and learn to love myself again. I don't want to wait another day. I've waited long enough. I'm ready. I can see the sun. It's coming up. There's happiness on the horizon. I'm hopeful I can see the light. I've hesitated all my life, but I'm all done. I'm done running from you. Spent my whole life in your shadow, scared of who I'd be if I said goodbye and I didn't have you here. I wish you well, but I can no longer stand aside and watch you sabotage the two of us. I love you to death, but I can't spend the rest of my life in this darkness. I'm done. I'm done. So we see in Running that Nate is talking to Fear almost with sympathy, with empathy. He says, I love you to death, right? You'd think if you were talking to someone that you were enemies with for so long, that what you'd say when you're finally getting away from them isn't, I love you to death. But for Nate and Fear, I mean, they've been together for so long, it's hard to say goodbye, right? Remember, Nate has had trouble for all the albums picturing what his life would be like without Fear. And this sympathy and empathy gets even deeper in the final verse. So let's read the final verse of this journey. I love you, but not enough to allow you to continue to drown the both of us. You're holding me back. You're pulling me down. You're making me hate myself. I don't want to leave, but that's what I need. I ain't got a choice. I can't just let you deceive and make me believe that I don't deserve to be loved. I am not going to stand aside and watch you attempt to rob and steal and sabotage what little faith I have left. Haven't I sacrificed enough for you? I hate seeing you cry, but I think it's time to let go and say our goodbyes. Yeah, I'm going to miss you, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life running. What's Nate going to miss about Fear? I think what Nate's saying when he says, I'm going to miss you, is that he's going to miss the comfort, the ease that came with staying locked inside of the mansion instead of addressing those problems. I mean, let's look at this entire journey. This has not been an easy journey for Nate by any stretch of the imagination. Nate's been at the point of suicide. Nate's been questioning himself the entire way. Nate's been lied to. Okay, Nate's had mental breakdowns, right? His emotions have gotten the best of him over and over and over again. Nate's had to struggle this entire journey. So he's going to miss the comfort of the mansion. But at this point in Running, he recognizes just how toxic that relationship with Fear was and how much it was killing Nate. Nate sees the full picture, and he didn't figure this out by himself, remember. He has his wife, he had a therapist, right? And now at this point, with his wife, with his son, with a renewed relationship with God, and now a hopeful outlook on the future, now living in freedom, now Nate can once and for all say goodbye to the house that he built, say goodbye to Fear, right? Say goodbye to the fear of what will come after he opens those doors of the mansion. And now Nate can once and for all say hello to a life of freedom. And that's the end of the journey so far. I'm really looking forward to where this journey goes next. I almost predict that the next album is actually going to be called Freedom. But man, I have absolutely loved this journey, this story that Nate told through his music. it's impacted me ever since I started listening to Nate, to NF. Now we can talk about NF, or about Nate, using his rapper name. Um, Watching NF tell this real human story through music, through 6 albums, has been an utter privilege, has been an honor, and man, it's this doing this has just made me appreciate this story even more. So with that, if you haven't watched, if you have watched both parts of this story, first off, I want to thank you. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you supporting the content. If you found this content valuable, like and subscribe. Help this channel grow. So there's not going to be any programming note. There's not going to be any new content out this week. Life's getting really busy for me, so I won't be able to put out any new content the rest of this week. But what I am going to do is I'm going to put parts 1 and 2 together so that they're just one full video, and so you don't have to watch 2 different parts. If you'd like me to share one of your stories of a moment in your life that you're grateful for, if you'd like me to share it on the channel, you can do so by emailing talkgratitude at gmail.com, and I will share that moment on the channel. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed this journey. I hope this has helped you see this story in a new light. I hope you can see the biblical elements in this story. I want to thank you for checking this content out, and I will see you in the next video. Later.